Salvete, viatores, and welcome back to Eutropius Breviarium Historiae Romanae ab orbe condita. Last time we began the Pyrrhic War, introducing the Romans to their first enemy outside of Italy. Though it's off to a rocky start, with Pyrrhus gaining victory, though Eutropius claims it was barely a victory, at the Battle of Heraclea. We also saw a weird interaction between two bits of grammar, a past contrary to fact condition within an indirect statement. Today, we continue on with Pyrrhus after his victory. Oh, also, here are the sources I'm referencing for these next few chapters on the Pyrrhic War, so that I can compare them to Eutropius' account. Aight, now let's go. Poste Pyrrhus, conjunctis sibi samnitibus Lucanis Britiis, Romam perexit, omnia ferro ignique vastavit. Campaniam populatus est, atque ad praeneste venit, miliario ab orbe octavo decimo. So, first, postea is an adverb meaning afterwards. Pyrrhus is our subject, because, it's just his name, so it's in the nominative. Conjunctis over to Britiis, all ablatives. Well, except for sibi, but we'll get there. So, and conjunctis is from conjunctus, which is the perfect passive participle from conjungo. And so, participle plus the ablative absolute. And conjunctis, it literally means like to bind to. So literally, this is, let's say, having, the Samnites, Lucanians, and Bruttians, having been bound sibi to him, meaning to Pyrrhus, and that's what this literally is saying. And conjungo / conjunctus can use either the dative or accusative, just for a regular direct object. So, literally bound to him, but you could also just say, the Samnites, Lucanians, and Bruttians allied with him, because allied to him doesn't sound quite right. So I'd say allied with him, or joined him, maybe? Because this is, the Samnites, Lucanians, and Bruttians, you might recognize, definitely the Samnites. You definitely will recognize the Samnites, because the Romans only finished the third and final Samnite War less than a decade before Pyrrhus. So, of course, these people, these other Italians, are still upset with the Romans and their expansion. So they joined Pyrrhus. Even though there was, I don't remember if Eutropius mentioned this, but about, how long was it? 20, 30 years maybe? Before this, while Alexander the Great was conquering Persia, Alexander I of Epirus, who is related to Pyrrhus, is like an uncle or something, he tried to conquer Italy and was beaten by these southern Italian peoples. So it's interesting that they are joining with someone else who tried to conquer them against the Romans, but I guess they see the Romans as a bigger threat. What's also kind of funny about this is, so Pyrrhus just fought a battle against the Romans, and now the Samnites, Lucanians, and Bruttians join with Pyrrhus. In Plutarch and Cassius Dio, they actually talk about how Pyrrhus was upset by the tardiness of these people. Of course he would want more men before a big battle, but they only joined him afterwards, after he had proven his superiority, his obvious superiority to the Romans. But alright, let's move on then. Romam, accusative, and perexit. Perexit comes from purgo, which just means to go, or to proceed, to continue. So this is the perfect form, perfect tense. So he, or Pyrrhus, since he's still the subject for this verb, Pyrrhus proceeded Romam, to Rome. Or I guess you could say towards Rome, since he never actually got to Rome, as we'll see in a second. Omnia ferro ignique vastavit. So, que, that little conjunction suffix. Vastavit is our verb Omnia is our object here, because Pyrrhus is still the subject. So Pyrrhus, wastowit, this is from wasto, and that means to lay waste or destroy or ravage. So he laid waste omnia to everything. Or you could say, like, he ravaged everything. Ferro ignique. Igni, you could probably guess, means fire. It's the ablative form from ignus. Not ignus, ignis. But ferro, if you know chemistry, you might recognize ferrum. So ferrum means iron. That's why on the periodic table, iron is Fe. And this is an example of something called metonymy. Metonymy is when you refer to something by simply a part of it. So like someone's wheels for their bike or car. So by iron here, they're referring to sword. So by sword and fire, he ravaged everything. Though usually we would reverse that with fire and sword. That's just more so the phrase we use in English, so that's what I'm going to be translating it as, even if it is iron and fire. So far, afterwards, Pyrrhus, after the Samnites, Lucanians, and Bruttians joined with him, he continued toward Rome. He ravaged everything with fire and sword. Campaniam, that's clearly accusative. Populatus est, atque ad praeneste, ad being a preposition, very common one in fact, and venit, another verb. So, campaniam populatus est. So campaniam is our accusative, our object, so you can probably guess Pyrrhus is still the subject, no different subject here. Populatus est. Perfect passive participle, and don't be fooled. This is not, it's not something happening to Pyrrhus, even if it looks like, well really yeah, it just looks like a perfect passive participle, because it comes from the word populor. That is a deponent verb. It looks passive, but actually it's always active. And because there is no perfect passive form for a verb, it just uses the perfect passive participle. So Pyrrhus, populatus est, populor means, it's basically a synonym of wasto. So laid waste, ravaged, destroyed. You could also say plunder, or pillage. Pyrrhus pillaged Campania. Campania is just a region south of Rome. It was one of the wealthier regions in Italy, in fact. Atque and ad praeneste, to Praeneste, which is a city we've seen before that the Romans conquered. Venit. We've seen this word plenty of times before. He came ad praeneste, to Praeneste. Mediario ab urbe octavo decimo. We've seen this plenty of times, though I feel like it's been a bit. This is ablative of place where at the 8, 10, 18th. Miliario, milestone, ab urbe, from the city. If you don't know, and you're watching this, the Romans had milestones, supposedly at about every mile. So he came to about the 18th milestone from the city, which is about where the city Praeneste was, which is fairly close to Rome. And of course, urbe, the city, it refers to Rome. When just a Latin source, when a Roman source, I should say, refers to just the city, it's usually Rome. Oh, and that's the whole sentence. Neat. Let's go over it. Afterwards, Pyrrhus, after the Samnites, Lucanians, and Bruttians joined to him, he continued toward Rome. He wasted everything with fire and sword. He pillaged Campania and came to Praeneste at the 18th milestone from the city. Oh, and by the way, Plutarch claims that Pyrrhus came specifically 300 stadia, or 56 kilometers, or 35 miles from the city. Mox terrore exercitus, qui eum cum console sequebatur, in campaniam se recepit. So mox is an adverb, meaning soon. Terrore exercitus, exercitus. So terrore is from terror, meaning terror, which also just fear. Exercitus, that means an army. And I need you to realize it is not the subject of the sentence. It's still Pyrrhus. We're still using Pyrrhus as the subject. Because exercitus is fourth declension and actually being used as the genitive. So, by terror of the army, and it'll make a little more sense in a second, qui, a relative clause referring back to the army, eum cum consule, being used as the preposition with cum, because consule, in the ablative, sequebatur. So the army, which, sequebatur, it looks passive, but this is another deponent verb, so, from sequor, imperfect by the ba, so, which was following, eum, him being Pyrrhus, cum consule, not consule, consule, with the consul. So the consul, who I believe is still Laevinus, was pursuing Pyrrhus as he was ravaging Campania, and by the terror of the army, in Campaniam se recepit. Oh wait, no, he wasn't ravaging Campania anymore. He came to Praeneste, which is closer to Rome. So then, after that, recepit is from recipio, I think? Yes. Perfect tense, third person, singular, active, blah, blah, blah. It means to return, or to take back, or recapture, such and such. So, well, return, it could also be retreat. So he retreated, say, himself. You don't really need to say himself. He retreated himself. But, yeah, you don't need to say himself. We don't say that in English. But if you want to be literal to the Latin, he retreated himself in Campania, into Campania. So he went back to Campania after Laevinus, with a new army, began to pursue Pyrrhus. And in fact, he had actually... Pyrrhus wanted to take Capua, which was one of the wealthiest cities in Italy. Which I think that was a big deal during the Second Punic War with Hannibal, that Hannibal was able to take Capua. But I think Laevinus got there first, so Pyrrhus had to back off. And then Laevinus continued to pursue Pyrrhus. I believe that is the narrative of what's happening here. But for the whole sentence, to put it together, mox soon, recepit, he retreated himself, say, in Campania, into Campania, by fear, or with the fear of the army, which was following him with the consul. Legati ad Perrum terremendis captivis missi ab eo honorificae suscepti sunt. So finally, new subject, legati. We saw last chapter about the legati that had been injured by the Tarentines. These are ambassadors. Ad Perrum, to Pyrrhus with this little prepositional phrase, and with another one coming right after with de remendis. In fact, yeah, captivis is included in that too, because ad takes the accusative, so ad Pyrrhum, and then it goes to another preposition, so that's the whole prepositional phrase with ad, but de takes the ablative, so de remendis and captivis, those are both dative plural, so they go with de. And right here, this is, I believe, just the, yeah, this is a perfect passive participle from mito, so sent. So the legates sent, or not legates, the ambassadors sent ad Pyrrhum to Pyrrhus, de, on or about, remendis. Remendis comes from redemendus. Why did I say remendis? Redemendis comes from redemendus, which is a future passive participle from redimo, which is like something to be redeemed or returned. So on the captivis, we've seen this before. Captives, have we seen this? I don't know. It's related to capio, which we had seen last chapter. But captivis, captives. So on the captives to be returned. Ab, another preposition. Eo honorificae, so skepti sunt. Honorificae is actually an adverb. It looks like it could potentially be ablative given the e ending, but it is an adverb, so the preposition ends there. Ab eo. And so skepti sunt, another perfect passive participle, which is kind of just being used as a perfect passive verb. I believe susceptus is received. Yeah, taken up or received. So the legates or ambassadors were received honorificae, honorably or respectfully, ab eo, by him being Pyrrhus. So the whole sentence, like this verb kind of messed me up at first because it's like verb and then just kind of another verb without like a conjunction separating the two phrases, but it actually makes sense once you put it together, even in this word order. So ambassadors sent to Pyrrhus on the captives to be returned were received honorably by him. That's the whole sentence. It works perfectly well in English, just moving around the verb so that they come before the object. Well, not even object. Well, just having the verbs come earlier in the sentence, because that's how it usually is in English. Captivos sine pretio Romam missit. So, oh wait, I think we did see captivi last chapter near the end. I'm not actually looking, I'm just trying to remember. But captivos, that's definitely accusative with that os ending. Sine is a preposition meaning without. When it takes an ablative, so pretio, ablative. Romam is not ablative, so there we go. Romam, I don't know exactly how to say this, or at least like the proper explanation. Missit, verb, same thing with missi. Same origin. It is from mito, the perfect tense. So missit is just third person singular, perfect, active, indicative. And this time we're back to Pyrrhus being the subject. So he sent, because there's no subject stated in this sentence. So he sent captuos, the captives, Romam. It's not the locative case. The locative case is kind of rarely used in only specific circumstances. And a city is an example of what would use the locative because it's just for a location, but Romae would be the locative, but not Romam. So I don't know exactly, but they were sent to Rome. I guess maybe the accusative itself can just have a sort of, like how ablative can be placed where? Maybe accusative could be like a sort of movement, like going to somewhere. I haven't looked into that, but I think that's what's happening here. Kind of like the Romam in the first sentence. Because there's technically no real object with Perexit. Because it's more so, what is it, intransitive? Because he's not proceeding something else, he's just proceeding to Rome. So I don't think Romam may actually be the object here. Either way, he sent the captives to Rome, sine, without, pretio, that is from pretium, it means like price. So, or, in this circumstance, ransom. So normally when returning soldiers, you would demand a ransom for them. Like you'd get paid to return the soldiers that you have captured back to their, I was going to say motherland, but like their native land, their native government. But here, Pyrrhus sent them home without any kind of ransom. Good guy, Pyrrhus. Which, actually, there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that, because Eutropius is kind of skipping over some stuff here. Everything that happens after, like, I think the next sentence, honestly, I think this whole next chapter technically happens, the rest of the chapter, I think, happens before he sends the captives back to Rome. But at the very least, I didn't actually not jot down what sources say that he sent the captives back to Rome without ransom, but I know several of them did, and you'll see exactly which ones where do have it so that do state that Pyrrhus returned the captives without ransom. But yeah, that's the whole sentence. He sent the captives to Rome without ransom. Pretty simple. Unum ex legatis Romanorum fabricium sic admiratus cum eum pauperem esse cognoscit, ut quarta parte regni promissa solicitare volueret, ut ad se transiret. Contemptusque est a fabricio. So, unum ex legatis Romanorum, I'm just including Romanorum because it is genitive modifying the legatis. That's truly part of the prepositional phrase with ex. Ex takes ablative, but Romanorum, again, genitive modifying legatis. So, unum, from the ambassadors of the Romans, fabricius. And you may be wondering, why is this accusative? Well, sic is an adverb, usually meaning so, like so, but can also be so much. Admiratus is a participle, but not perfect passive. It is perfect active, a perfect active participle, from admiror, like having admired, admired. Oh, he admired. Blah. It is Pyrrhus still as the subject again. So Pyrrhus, having admired one from the ambassadors of the Romans, Fabricius, so much, cum eum pauperem esse cognoscit, cum being the conjunction here, because there's no ablative to be a preposition with, cognoscit is our verb, pluperfect here instead of just perfect. So when he had discovered or learned eum, him, esse, an infinitive from sum, so just to be. So discovered him to be pauperem, kind of also object. And pauperem, one may recognize pauper or pauper. That is the nominative form, So you might be able to guess poor, which is exactly what it means. It is an adjective meaning poor. So he, Pyrrhus, having admired one from the ambassadors of the Romans, Fabricius, so much, when he had learned him to be poor, that, so he admired him so much that, with ut, and specifically ut means that or so that as like a purpose, because voluerit is subjunctive. If it was indicative, it would be different. But here it's purpose with the subjunctive. So that he wanted sollicitare, to like tempt or offer. So all of these are ablative, I think. Promissa is a participle from promitto, which means to promise. So with a promised quarter, parte from pars, part, regni, which is actually genitive from regnus, of the kingdom. So he wanted to tempt Fabricius with a promised quarter part of his kingdom. He was offering a quarter of his kingdom just for Fabricius, well, ut, so that, again, ad se, to him, transidet, he would go over. This is imperfect subjunctive, and working with the ut as a purpose, so that he would. That's what the purpose is, why we're saying would. So that he would go over to him, meaning that he would join Pyrrhus, abandoning Rome. So far, for the whole sentence, up to the end, because we still got a little bit. One from the ambassadors of the Romans, Fabricius, he admired so much. Honestly, I feel like this order isn't as good. I feel like this from cum to cognoscit should probably come first. When he had learned him to be a pauper. No, maybe just having that before that. So, having admired one from the ambassadors of the Romans, Fabricius, so much that when he had learned him to be a pauper, or to be poor, I should say, because this is not a noun, it's an adjective, to be poor, he wanted to tempt with a promised quarter part of his kingdom so that he would go over to him. That sounds good. And so that I don't have random thoughts in the middle, one more time. Having admired one from the ambassadors of the Romans, Fabricius, so much that when he had learned him to be poor, he wanted to tempt with a promised quarter part of the kingdom. And in fact, I already finished the section, so there. I think that's fine. I don't know what exactly to mark promissa with, because it's still a participle. I think it's kind of modifying parte. Let's do that. So yeah, that's all that. And then the last part of the sentence, contemptusque est a Fabricio. So que, conjunction suffix, a Fabricio, a takes the ablative, so that's Fabricio right there. And contemptus est, verb, perfect passive participle, from contemno. Contemptus means, like, despised or despicable.
Oh, wait. Oh, no, it's not a...
It's not a participle, it's just a straight up adjective? Weird. Huh, okay. Well, it looked like a participle to me. Just at first glance. It looked like a participle at first glance, but it's an adjective. Though, wait, this looks... It truly looks like a participle because of the est there. I swear this is being used as a participle. Because it looks like it should be, and he was despised by Fabricius. Is it not a participle? What the heck? At least, I'm looking at Wiktionary, and it's not saying anything about a participle. Going to the Lewis and Short dictionary. There it is. Contemptus, perfect passive participle. Okay, from contemno. Yeah. Let this be a lesson to you. Don't rely on just one source. Always check with other sources on different things, especially words. So, yes, contemptus is a perfect passive participle. He was despised by Fabricius. So, Fabricius, his full name was Gaius Fabricius Luscanus. And a bunch of, at least a couple of my sources actually introduced Fabricius beforehand. I think, yeah, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Cassius Dio, and Appian, they all introduce Fabricius before he interacts with Pyrrhus. Usually, just saying how he fought against the Gauls in the north before the Pyrrhic War. He was apparently a part of the delegation to Tarentum, and Appian specifically says that Fabricius was sent to reclaim Rhegium, which is a city near the toe of Italy that had rebelled against Rome. And this guy, he is well known, or at least was well known, for being poor, but also one of the most moral Romans. Because of course, Pyrrhus tried to bribe him, but he said no, absolutely not. There are whole speeches in different sources as well for this. And there are also a couple different anecdotes that I really enjoy. The one that is most memorable to me is when Pyrrhus is trying to scare Fabricius to I guess, intimidate or impress him. Because Pyrrhus, he may have had a man crush on this guy. So Pyrrhus, he has elephants. So he hides one behind a curtain and has Fabricius come up to it. And then he just suddenly pulls down the curtain, has the elephant make tons of noise, and Fabricius just no-sells it. It's hilarious. That's specifically in Plutarch. I didn't actually find it anywhere else. So it's probably not a true story, but I think it's really fun. He also, I was only able to find this in Plutarch as well, but according to Plutarch, Fabricius attributed the loss at Heraclea not to, the Romans in general, but to Laevinus. He said that the Epirotes had not beaten the Romans, but that Pyrrhus had beaten Laevinus. So, dang, that's trying to keep up the spirits of the Romans and take Pyrrhus down a peg, trying to get that ego checked. Also, I think it is fitting that Eutropius includes specifically the story of the attempted bribery here, because that was in every single source that I'm using for this, except for Justin. For some reason, I wasn't able to find it in Justin, which is weird. But still, Plutarch, Cassius Dio, Dionysius, Appian, Livy via the Periochae, and Zonaras all have this story. But alright, enough about Fabricius himself. In fact, there's a lot to talk about with Fabricius, but we're just going to continue on. First, let me go over the whole sentence real quick. Having admired one from the ambassadors of the Romans, Fabricius, so much that when he had learned him to be poor, he wanted to tempt with a promised quarter part of his kingdom so that he would come over to him. And he was despised by Fabricius. Oh, I don't know if I said this in this recording or if it was a previous recording, because I record these multiple times to try to get things right. But from cum to conoisset, I think you could translate it a couple different ways. Either when he had learned he was poor, or when he had learned him to be poor. The latter is more literal to the Latin, but the former sounds like more natural English, at least modern English. I'm going to go with the latter just to be a little closer to the Latin, but I do not blame anyone who wants the former. Quare cum Pyrrhus Romanorum ingenti admiratione teneretur, legatum missit, qui pacem aequis conditionibus peteret, praecipum verum, caneam nomine, ita ut Pyrrhus partem Italiae, quam iam armis occupaverat, obteneret. So quare is an adverb. Oh, no, too big a circle. Adverb. Too small a circle, but it's good enough. Meaning, here I'm going to say therefore, it's the only translation that I could find that makes sense to me. Cum, conjunction once again, because no ablative. Pyrrhus, our subject, because he's nominative. Romanorum ingenti admiratione teneretur. Teneretur is our verb. And ingenti admiratione are both ablative. They're agreeing, so ingenti from ingens is agreeing with admiratione, modifying it. And Romanorum, I think, as a genitive, is modifying admiratione. So therefore, when Pyrrhus, teneretur, and this time it's actually passive. It's not a deponent verb. It's from teneo, which means to hold. So when Pyrrhus was held, or I've seen it translated as struck, but I wouldn't go that far. But when he was sort of affixed, admiratione ingenti, with immense admiration, Romanorum, of the Romans. He was just blown away by what he's experienced with the Romans, supposedly. Legatum missit. Legatum, accusative form from legatus, missit. We've seen this right here. He sent an ambassador. Qui, who, pacem aequis conditionibus peteret. Who, peteret is from peto. This should be, I believe it's imperfect subjunctive. So, who was begging or asking a piece. I guess, hold on. Can it be like suggest? Maybe more like aimed at or desired? No, because he's technically pleading his case. I'd say just, I'm going to translate it as he asked for a piece, aequis, which is from aequus, meaning equal, conditionibus. You probably see a potential word that's in there, condition. It's from condicio. So, he sent an ambassador who was seeking a peace or was asking for a peace with equal conditions. Basically, something fair for each side. Praekipum virum. Praekipum means like distinguished, a particular man. Virum being the accusative form of man. These are referring to legatum, the ambassador, which is why they're also in the accusative case. So, I'm going to say distinguished man. Cineam nomine, by name, Cineas, or Cineas by name. Because I got a bit to talk about with this guy once we're done with this sentence, so give me a second, because I love this guy. Ita, I believe, is an adverb. Let me make sure, because I've been getting adverbs and conjunctions mixed up a lot. Yes, it is an adverb. So, because it could just be so. Ut, that, like, it would literally be so that, and ut is going with the obtineret here, and that you could see with the infinitive plus an ending. That would be imperfect subjunctive, so ut is being used for purpose, but ut itself is the so that. I don't know what the ita is here for. Maybe just thus, so that Pyrrhus, again, the subject, partem is accusative, m ending with at least not a verb. Partem Italiae, let's do that actually, that makes it more clear. Italiae, genitive form of Italy, part of Italy. Quam, actually, let's wait for a second with this relative clause. So, obtineret means it's from obtineo, again, imperfect subjunctive. You might be able to see a relation to an English word, obtain. So that, or I guess thus, so that Pyrrhus would obtain part of Italy, or the part of Italy, quam, which, quam is the accusative because it is referring to partem. That's what it is relative to. Which, iam, adverb for already. I think last chapter we translated as now? Because it was the first sentence. Or maybe still? But here it's like all, I'm going to say it already. Occupaverat, so the part which, already, occupaverat, it should be clear that it means occupy, and this is pluperfect by the erat ending, which already had been occupied, or no, not had been occupied, because it's active, there's no ur at the end of there, so which already he had occupied armis, ablative plural from arma, I believe. So, which already he had occupied by arms. So, basically, Pyrrhus, well, Cineas, by extension Pyrrhus, is asking, just let him keep whatever he's already occupied with his army. It seems kind of fair. The Romans already lost a battle, so, just let Pyrrhus keep what he's already taken and go home. But, Cineas, oh, I love this man. Ever since, he is one of the reasons why I find Plutarch's Life of Pyrrhus so memorable. So one, first off, he was a student of the famous Athenian orator Demosthenes, who Cicero, the famous Roman orator, ripped off with his Philippics. But fun thing with Cineas, supposedly he won more cities for Pyrrhus through words than Pyrrhus did through his sword, which is in a couple of the different sources. So that's fun, and kind of suggests just how distinguished Cineas is and how good of a speaker he was. I mean, he was a student of Demosthenes, after all. Demosthenes was known as one of the greatest orators ever at the time. But there's also an anecdote in Plutarch that it really sold me on him and Plutarch as a writer. I'm not going to quote the whole thing. Go read it if you want. But he basically asks why they're invading Italy and what they'll do after they win. Pyrrhus says this is right before they go to Italy, while they're preparing. Pyrrhus says they'll conquer the rest of Italy. And Cineas just asks, and then? Then they'll conquer Sicily. And after that, then they'll conquer Carthage and Numidia in Africa. And what about then? Then they'll go back to Greece and Macedonia, and finally they'll make their grand return. And after that? Well, they'll basically have everything, and so they'll eat, drink, and be merry. And Cineas then simply asks, and what is stopping us from doing that now? I know the whole exchange is probably just made up and only serves Plutarch's moralist agenda of greed bad, but it's just, I don't know, it just feels like it encapsulates everything he's trying to do just in such a good and concise way that it's not just my favorite part of Plutarch, not just one of my favorite bits of writing from ancient literature, it's one of my favorite bits of writing in general. I just love it that much. And though the dialogue is not there, the urge of being satisfied with what you have is also in Cassius Dio. Not the whole dialogue, but just Cineas urging Pyrrhus to be satisfied with just what he already has rather than trying to go for more and more and more. It's one of the reasons why I love the Life of Pyrrhus by Plutarch. It's just so good. But we'll be seeing more of Cineas in the next chapter, so let's just leave it there for now. But before we head off, let's go over this sentence one more time, and then we will do a full reading of this chapter in Latin and English. So, quare, therefore, cum, when Pyrrhus was held by immense admiration of the Romans, he sent an ambassador who was asking for a peace with equal conditions, a distinguished man, Cineas by name. Thus, that Pyrrhus would obtain part of Italy, or the part of Italy, which already he had occupied by arms. Postea Pyrrhus conjunctis sibi samnitibus Lucanis Bretis Romam perexit, omnia ferro ignique vastuit, campaniam populatus est, atque ad praeneste venet, meliario ab orbe octavo decimo, mox terrore exercitus, qui eum cum consule sequebator, in campaniam se recepit. Legati ad perrum de redumendis captivis missi, ab eo honorifice susceptisunt. Captuos sine pretio Romam missit. Unum ex legatis Romanorum fabricium, sic adveratus cum eum pauperum esse cognovissent, ut quarta parte regni promissa solicitare voruelit, ut ad se transiret, contemptusque est a fabricio. Quare cum Pyrrhus Romanorum in genti admiratione teneretur, legatum missit, qui pacem aequis conditionibus peteret, praecum verum, Cineam nomine, ita ut Pyrrhus partem Italiae, quam iam armis occupaverat, obteneret. Afterwards, Pyrrhus, after the Samnites, Lucanians, and Bruttians joined with him, pressed on to Rome. He wasted everything with fire and sword. He ravaged Campania and came to Praeneste, at the 18th milestone from the city. Soon, by fear of the army which was following him with the consul, he retreated himself to Campania. The ambassadors sent to Pyrrhus about the return of captives were received honorably by him. He sent the captives to Rome without ransom, having admired one from the ambassadors of the Romans, Fabricius, so much that when he had learned him to be poor, he wanted to entice with a promised quarter part of his kingdom, so that he would come over to him. And he was despised by Fabricius. Therefore, when Pyrrhus was held with immense admiration of the Romans, he sent an ambassador who was asking for a peace with fair conditions, a distinguished man, Cneas by name, thus, so that Pyrrhus would obtain the part of Italy which he already occupied by arms. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've continued to enjoy my looking at different sources to give you more pieces that Eutropius doesn't include, or just how much of his story comes from where, because it's still very fun, and I really enjoy getting to tell different stories that Eutropius would never include because he's trying to be brief, especially about Cneas. I'm really happy that next time we get to talk even more about Cneas, as well as more of Pyrrhus' negotiating with Rome, and the next battle in the war. So until next time, valete, viatores.